a king, a kingdom stretching across 127 provinces, and a single decree that would erase an entire people from history. In the ancient Persian Empire, in a palace built on power and paranoia, a plot was set in motion. One man's hatred, one signature away from genocide. But hidden within those palace walls was a secret no one saw coming. A Jewish orphan girl raised by her cousin, chosen for her beauty, was about to become queen. Her name was Hadassah. The world would come to know her as Esther. She had no army, no political power, no right to even speak to the king without being summoned, a crime punishable by death. All she had was courage and one impossible choice: stay silent and survive, or step forward and risk everything to save her people. What she did next would change the fate of a nation and echo through history for over 2,000 years. This is the untold, complete story of Esther, the queen who risked her life, outwitted an empire, and saved her people from annihilation. And it all begins with a banquet, a beauty contest, and a secret about to unravel. One woman's courage would decide whether an entire nation lived or died, and almost no one would ever know her name. In the 5th century before Christ, the Persian Empire stretched across 127 provinces, from India to Ethiopia, ruled by a single throne. At the heart of this empire stood the citadel of Susa, the winter residence of King Xerxes, a ruler both feared and worshipped by his subjects. In the 3rd year of his reign, Xerxes summoned every noble and official of his empire to a feast that would last 180 days. It was a display of unmatched wealth and power, designed to remind the entire empire of the glory, the riches, and the might of their king. On the 7th day of the feast, emboldened by wine, the king desired to display one final treasure before his guests: his wife, Queen Vashti. Vashti was hosting her own banquet for the women of the palace, and when summoned to appear before the king's guests, she refused to come. Her refusal was not simple defiance. In a culture built on public honor, it was a challenge to the king's authority in front of his entire court. The king's rage was immediate, but his advisors feared something greater. If word spread that a queen could defy her husband, wives across the empire might follow. His counselors urged him to remove Vashti permanently from her position, decreeing that she would never again appear before the king, to preserve order across the realm. And so, in a single night, Vashti was cast aside, her fall from power creating a vacancy that would soon reshape the fate of an entire people. For now, the throne beside the king sat empty. No one yet knew that its next occupant would rise from the most unlikely and unprotected of places. Far from the marble halls of the palace lived a community of Jewish exiles, descendants of those carried into captivity generations earlier, still without a homeland of their own. Among them lived a man named Mordecai, a descendant of Jewish exiles, who served faithfully at the king's gate, though his people held no power in this empire. Mordecai had raised his younger cousin, an orphaned girl named Hadassah, as his own daughter, after the deaths of both her father and her mother. She was known among her people as Hadassah, but in time, the world beyond her village would come to know her by another name, Esther. Two worlds existed side by side in this empire, one of gold and power, the other of quiet survival, and fate was about to collide them. Word soon spread throughout the empire. The king's advisors had proposed a search for a new queen, one that would summon young women from every province. This is a story of empires and orphans, of hidden identities and impossible choices, and it begins with a search that would change history forever. Stories like this one have survived for thousands of years because they were carefully preserved and retold. If you'd like more of these stories brought to life, consider subscribing to this channel. As the king's officers rode into the provinces searching for beautiful young women to join the palace, Mordecai understood that his household would not be overlooked. What Mordecai and Hadassah could not yet know was that this moment, however frightening, was the first step toward an extraordinary and dangerous destiny. A queen had fallen, a search had begun, and in a small, unnoticed household at the edge of the empire, history was quietly preparing to change course. Throughout the 127 provinces of the empire, royal officers began their search, seeking out the most beautiful young women to bring before the king. This was not an invitation families could refuse. Young women selected by the king's officers were taken directly into the palace, whether their households consented or not. Mordecai understood the danger closing in around his household, knowing that his cousin's beauty would not go unnoticed by the officers now moving through Susa. She had grown into a young woman of remarkable grace, though she remained humble, unaware of how her life was about to change forever. When the king's officers arrived at Mordecai's home, they took notice of Hadassah immediately, and she was brought among the young women chosen for the palace. Before she departed, Mordecai gave her one final instruction. She must never reveal her identity as a Jew, nor speak of the family that raised her. It was a command born not of shame, but of survival. In an empire where her people held no protection, concealment might be her only shield. Hadassah entered the king's harem along with women gathered from every province of the empire, each one unaware of what awaited them in the months ahead. There, under the care of the king's eunuch, she was given a new name to be known by within the palace. From that day forward, she was called Esther. The name Esther may have echoed an ancient word for star, a fitting name for someone whose true identity was about to shine unexpectedly. The keeper of the harem, a man named Haggai, was responsible for preparing each woman for her eventual meeting with the king whenever her turn arrived. From the moment he saw her, Haggai took a particular liking to Esther, quickly assigning her the finest rooms and the most attentive of her servants. She was given 7 chosen maids, and Haggai moved her and her attendants into the best place within the harem, favoring her above the others. Though separated from her now, Mordecai did not abandon Esther. Each day, he walked near the courtyard of the harem, seeking word of her welfare. For 12 full months, each young woman underwent a lengthy process of beauty treatments, prepared meticulously before ever being presented to the king. 6 months were spent with oil of myrrh, and 6 more with perfumes and cosmetics, an elaborate preparation before any woman could stand before the king. Despite the luxury surrounding her, Esther remained humble in spirit, never demanding more than what Haggai himself recommended for her appearance and preparation. While many women sought favor through elaborate requests, Esther's quiet humility and natural grace set her apart from the others gathered within the palace. As months passed one by one, the young women were called to spend a single night with the king before returning to a separate section of the harem. None of these women could return to the king again unless he specifically requested her by name, a detail that left many futures uncertain and unresolved. As Esther's own turn slowly approached, she carried with her not only her cousin's guidance, but also the weight of a secret she could not share. Neither Mordecai nor Esther could know it yet, but the year of preparation drawing to a close was leading toward a moment far greater than either imagined. After 12 months of preparation, the day finally arrived for Esther to be presented before King Xerxes, a moment that would decide far more than her own fate. On the morning Esther was to be presented before the king, her attendants dressed her simply, trusting Haggai's counsel rather than adorning her with excess. She asked for nothing beyond what was recommended, a quiet restraint that stood in stark contrast to the elaborate requests of the women who had gone before her. As she walked the long corridor toward the king's private chambers, she carried with her the hopes of a family and the secret of an entire people. King Xerxes had seen many women brought before him in the past year, yet none had captured his attention the way Esther did in that quiet moment. Something about her humility, her composure, and her quiet strength distinguished her instantly from every other woman who had entered that chamber before her. The scripture records that the king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she won his grace and favor above everyone who had come before her. Without hesitation, the king set the royal crown upon her head, declaring Esther queen in the place of Vashti, the wife he had once cast aside. To celebrate her coronation, the king held a great banquet in Esther's honor, inviting his nobles and officials from across the vast Persian Empire. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal generosity, marking the occasion with a celebration befitting his new queen. Yet even as she sat crowned and celebrated, Esther had not forgotten Mordecai, nor the instruction that still bound her, to keep her true heritage hidden. Mordecai, meanwhile, had taken up a position sitting daily at the king's gate, close enough to remain near Esther, though her identity as a queen changed nothing between them. From this position, Mordecai could observe the comings and goings of the court, remaining a quiet, watchful presence just beyond the palace's inner walls. Even after her coronation, Esther continued to follow Mordecai's instructions closely, maintaining the same obedience she had shown him since childhood. Not long after Esther's coronation, two of the king's chamberlains, guards who stood watch at the palace door, began plotting quietly against the king's life. Their motive remains unrecorded, but their intent was clear: to assassinate King Xerxes, striking at the very heart of the empire's power. By providence or chance, Mordecai overheard their plotting, recognizing immediately the danger it posed not only to the king, but to the entire empire. Mordecai wasted no time, sending word immediately to Queen Esther, informing her of the conspiracy forming against her husband, the king. Esther relayed the warning to the king, careful to credit Mordecai by name, ensuring the information reached him swiftly and without delay. An investigation confirmed the plot, and the two conspirators were swiftly executed. Their plan against the king's life ended before it could ever unfold. The event was carefully recorded in the official chronicles of the kingdom, noting Mordecai's loyalty, though no reward was given to him at that time. This small, overlooked detail, a debt of gratitude left unpaid, would resurface later, at the precise moment when it mattered most of all. Meanwhile, elsewhere within the empire's growing court, a new figure was beginning his rapid ascent to power, a man named Haman, an Agagite noble. The king elevated Haman above all other officials, granting him authority second only to the throne itself, a decision that would soon threaten everything Esther held dear. With his new authority granted by the king, Haman commanded immediate respect throughout the empire, and the king ordered all officials to bow before him. Every official at the king's gate obeyed this command without hesitation, recognizing Haman's newfound power and the consequences of failing to honor it. Yet one man remained standing amid the bowing crowd. Mordecai refused to bend his knee, remaining upright in quiet, unshaken defiance. Haman noticed the refusal immediately, and though he said nothing at first, the insult burned within him, growing sharper with every passing day. Day after day, the king's officials pressed Mordecai to explain his defiance, but he answered simply that he was a Jew and would bow to no man. His refusal was rooted in conviction. Bowing to Haman would have meant honoring a man in a manner Mordecai believed belonged to God alone. Eventually, the officials reported Mordecai's continued defiance to Haman directly, curious whether his Jewish identity would shield him from punishment. When Haman learned that Mordecai was a Jew, his anger transformed into something far greater and more dangerous than personal offense alone. He resolved that punishing Mordecai alone would not satisfy him. Instead, he set his mind toward destroying every Jewish person throughout the entire empire. Haman consulted his advisors and cast lots, known as Pur, to select the most favorable date for carrying out his plan of annihilation. The lots fell upon a date nearly a year away, in the 12th month, giving Haman ample time to secure the king's approval for his plan. With his plan formed, Haman approached King Xerxes directly, carefully choosing his words to manipulate the king without revealing his true target. Haman told the king of a certain people scattered throughout his provinces, whose laws differed from all others, and who did not keep the king's laws. He argued that it was not in the king's interest to tolerate them, framing his personal vendetta as a matter of imperial security and order. To further secure his request, Haman offered 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury, an enormous sum meant to guarantee the king's approval. Without investigating further, the king removed his own signet ring and gave it to Haman, granting him full authority to act as he saw fit. The king told Haman to keep the silver and do as he pleased with the people in question, unaware of the devastating consequences of his approval. With the king's ring now in his possession, Haman moved quickly to formalize his plan into an official decree that could never be revoked. Scribes were summoned to draft the decree in the script and language of every province, ensuring the order could be understood throughout the entire empire. The decree called for the destruction, killing, and annihilation of all Jews, young and old, women and children, on a single specified day. Once sealed, copies of the decree were distributed to every province by swift messengers, ensuring the order would reach every corner of the empire. As the decree was posted throughout the provinces, confusion and fear rippled through Jewish communities who had done nothing to provoke such devastating hatred. The scripture records that while the king and Haman sat down to drink together in comfort, the city of Susa itself was thrown into confusion and grief. As news of the decree spread from province to province, disbelief gave way to terror among Jewish communities who had lived peacefully for generations within the empire. Families who had built homes, raised children, and lived quietly under Persian rule now faced the terrifying reality that their very existence had been condemned by law. In cities throughout the empire, Jewish communities gathered in disbelief, uncertain how such hatred could be codified into law with the king's own authority. As was custom in times of great sorrow, many tore their clothing and covered themselves in ashes, mourning a devastation that had not yet even arrived. When Mordecai learned the full extent of Haman's decree, he understood immediately that his own defiance had placed his entire people in mortal danger. In deep anguish, Mordecai tore his clothes, dressed himself in sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, crying loudly and bitterly. He walked as far as the entrance of the king's gate, for no one clothed in sackcloth was permitted to pass through it, regardless of their standing. In every province the decree reached, there was great mourning among the Jewish people, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, many lying in sackcloth and ashes. Word soon reached Queen Esther that Mordecai stood outside the palace gate, dressed in mourning, though she did not yet understand the reason why. Esther was deeply distressed by the news and sent garments for Mordecai to wear in place of his sackcloth, hoping to ease his visible grief. But Mordecai refused to accept the clothing, for his grief could not be hidden beneath fine garments, while his people faced total destruction. Esther then sent Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs assigned to her, to learn directly from Mordecai what had caused such profound and public sorrow. Mordecai told Hathach everything that had happened and gave him a copy of the decree, so that Esther herself could read the words condemning her people. As Esther read the decree calling for the destruction of every Jew in the empire, the full weight of her people's danger became devastatingly clear to her. Mordecai instructed Hathach to urge Esther to go before the king, to make supplication for her people, and to plead for their lives before it was too late. Esther sent word back to Mordecai, reminding him that anyone who approached the king without being summoned faced death, unless he extended his golden scepter. This law applied to every person in the palace, including the queen herself, and Esther had not been summoned before the king in 30 days. When Mordecai received Esther's reply, he understood her fear, yet he also understood that silence now would cost far more than the risk of speaking. He sent back a message that would become among the most quoted and remembered lines in the entire account, one meant to awaken her courage. Mordecai warned her plainly that if she remained silent now, deliverance would arise for the Jews from another place, but she and her father's house would perish. He asked her a question that would echo through history. Who could say whether she had come to her royal position for exactly this moment? Mordecai's words settled over her like a call she could no longer ignore, a reminder that her silence would not protect her, only delay the inevitable. In that quiet chamber, beneath the weight of an impossible choice, Queen Esther began to compose her answer, one that would change the course of history. Esther composed her reply to Mordecai, choosing her words carefully, aware that this decision would determine the fate of every Jew within the empire. She instructed Hathach to carry her response directly to Mordecai, asking him to gather every Jew present within the city of Susa without delay. Esther asked that the Jewish community fast on her behalf, neither eating nor drinking for 3 full days and nights before she approached the king. She promised that she and her own maidens would fast in the same manner, joining her people in this shared act of humility and desperate hope. For 3 days, Esther neither ate nor drank, setting aside every comfort of her royal position to seek strength for what she was about to attempt. Throughout Susa, Jewish families joined their queen in this fast, uniting in a single act of faith despite the fear that gripped every household. Esther had sent one final message to Mordecai, declaring that she would go to the king, though it was against the law, and if she perished, she perished. On the third day, having completed her fast, Esther dressed herself in her royal robes and prepared to approach the king's inner court uninvited. She walked the long distance toward the inner court alone, knowing that every step forward carried with it the possibility of instant execution. At the threshold, she paused only a moment, drawing a final breath before stepping into the king's line of sight, fully visible and utterly exposed. When the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, his expression shifted, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. In that suspended moment, everything depended on a single gesture, whether the king would extend his golden scepter or condemn her instantly. To her relief, and to the relief of every witness present, the king extended the golden scepter, granting her life and permission to approach him. The king asked what troubled her, offering generously that she could request anything at all, even up to half of his entire kingdom. Rather than revealing her request immediately, Esther simply invited the king, along with Haman, to a private banquet she had prepared that same day. This careful, patient strategy allowed Esther to build trust and observe the king's mood, rather than risk everything on a single, hurried request. At the banquet, the king again asked Esther what she desired, sensing that something important remained unspoken beneath her gracious hospitality. Once again, Esther chose patience, requesting only that the king and Haman return the following day for a second banquet she would prepare. Haman left the banquet elated, believing himself the most favored man in the empire, chosen alone to dine privately with the king and queen. Yet his joy soured instantly at the sight of Mordecai, still seated calmly at the gate, still refusing to rise or bow before him. Haman complained bitterly to his wife and friends, admitting that all his wealth and honor meant nothing, while Mordecai remained unbowed at the gate. His wife and friends suggested he build gallows 50 cubits high and request the king's permission the next morning to hang Mordecai upon it. Delighted by the idea, Haman ordered the gallows built that very night, confident that by morning, his greatest enemy would finally be silenced forever. That same night, unable to sleep, King Xerxes commanded that the official chronicles of his reign be brought and read aloud to him. As the servant read through the records, he came upon the account of Mordecai's discovery of the assassination plot against the king's life. The king asked what honor or recognition had been given to Mordecai for his loyalty, and the attendants replied that nothing had ever been done. At that very hour, Haman arrived at the palace, intending to ask the king's permission to hang Mordecai upon the gallows built the night before. Learning that Haman stood waiting in the outer court, the king summoned him immediately, eager to seek his counsel on an urgent matter. The king asked Haman directly what should be done for a man the king wished to honor greatly, above all others in the kingdom. Convinced that he himself must be the man the king intended to honor, Haman's imagination raced toward the grandest possible rewards he could suggest. Haman proposed that the man be dressed in royal robes the king himself had worn, and paraded through the city upon the king's own horse. He suggested that one of the king's most noble princes should lead the honored man through the city square, declaring his greatness before all the people. Satisfied with the proposal, the king instructed Haman to carry out every detail exactly as described, for a man named Mordecai the Jew. The king's words struck Haman like a physical blow, for the man he despised above all others was now the very man he had to honor. With no choice but to obey the king's direct command, Haman gathered the royal robes and horse and made his way toward Mordecai at the gate. Haman dressed Mordecai in the royal robes and led him upon the king's horse through the streets of Susa, proclaiming his honor before the people. Haman himself proclaimed loudly before the crowd that this was what was done for the man the king desired to honor above all others. Every step of that procession was agony for Haman, forced to elevate the very man whose destruction he had planned only hours before. Haman hurried home afterward, his head covered in grief and humiliation, desperate to escape the public shame he had just endured. His wife and advisors warned him gravely that if Mordecai was indeed of Jewish origin, Haman's downfall before him had only just begun. Before Haman could fully process his humiliation, the king's messengers arrived, summoning him urgently to Queen Esther's second banquet that very evening. At this second banquet, the king again asked Esther what request lay upon her heart, promising once more to grant it, even to half his kingdom. This time Esther did not delay. She began to speak the words that would finally reveal both her identity and the danger facing her people. She asked the king to spare her life and the lives of her people, for they had been sold to destruction, to slaughter, and to complete annihilation. Stunned, the king demanded to know who had dared conceive such a plan, and who had presumed to threaten the life of his own queen. Esther answered without hesitation, declaring that the adversary and enemy was this very wicked Haman, seated now before the king at her own table. The banquet hall fell utterly silent, every guest frozen in place, as Haman realized the full and terrible weight of what had just been exposed. Overcome with rage, the king rose from the table and walked out into the palace garden, needing a moment to process the depth of Haman's betrayal. Terrified for his life, Haman fell before Esther, begging desperately for mercy, knowing full well that his fate now rested entirely in her hands. When the king returned and saw Haman fallen upon the queen's couch, his fury multiplied instantly, believing Haman now assaulted the queen herself. Guards moved quickly to seize Haman, covering his face according to custom, a clear sign that his execution was now certain and imminent. One of the king's attendants informed him of the gallows Haman had built that very night, originally intended for Mordecai, the man who had saved the king's life. Without hesitation, the king ordered that Haman be hanged upon the very gallows he had constructed for the man he once sought to destroy. Haman was led to the very gallows meant for Mordecai, and there upon the structure he had built with such confident cruelty, he met his end. With Haman's execution, the king's fury subsided, though the danger threatening the Jewish people throughout the empire remained far from resolved. That same day, the king gave Mordecai the position and authority once held by Haman, and Esther finally revealed his relation to her before the court. Mordecai, once a humble gatekeeper unnoticed by the empire, now stood before the king as one of the most powerful men in all of Persia. Though Haman was dead, his original decree calling for the destruction of the Jewish people throughout the empire remained legally in effect and unchanged. By Persian law, no decree sealed with the king's own signet ring could ever be revoked or reversed, regardless of the circumstances that followed. The king extended his golden scepter to Esther once more, granting her permission to propose whatever solution might yet save her people from destruction. Esther and Mordecai proposed that a new decree be written, granting the Jewish people throughout the empire the right to defend themselves when attacked. Scribes were summoned once again, this time drafting a decree that would empower the Jewish people to gather and defend themselves against their enemies. Mordecai sealed the new decree with the king's own ring, granting Jewish communities throughout the empire the legal right to protect their own lives. Riders were dispatched swiftly on horses bred for the king's own service, racing to deliver the new decree before the original date of destruction arrived. As the new decree reached each province, disbelief slowly gave way to hope, and communities that had prepared for death now prepared to defend themselves. Mordecai went out from the king's presence in royal robes of blue and white, wearing a great crown of gold, honored throughout the entire city. The scripture records that the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced, and among the Jewish people there was light and gladness, joy and honor. In every province and every city the king's decree reached, the Jewish people rejoiced together, and many among the surrounding nations aligned themselves with them. Yet even amid the celebration, the appointed day of destruction still approached, and throughout the empire, both Jews and their enemies began to prepare. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the very day originally appointed for their destruction, the Jewish people throughout the empire prepared to defend themselves. Those who had once mourned in sackcloth and ashes now stood armed and ready, empowered by the king's decree to fight for their own survival. Local officials, governors, and leaders throughout the provinces sided openly with the Jewish people, fearing the power Mordecai now held within the empire. Word of Mordecai's growing influence spread rapidly, and many officials, driven by fear rather than conviction, extended their support to the Jewish defenders. Within the capital city of Susa itself, tension reached its peak as those who sought to harm the Jewish community moved to carry out their plans. Throughout Susa, the Jewish people, now legally permitted to defend themselves, met their attackers directly, refusing to become victims of Haman's original decree. In the capital alone, the Jewish defenders overcame 500 men who had sought to destroy them, turning the tables entirely on their would-be attackers. That evening, the king informed Esther of the events within the capital and asked once more what further request she wished to bring before him. Esther requested that the Jewish people of Susa be granted one additional day to finish defending themselves, ensuring the threat was fully and completely removed. She also requested that the bodies of Haman's 10 sons, who had died in the fighting, be publicly displayed upon the same gallows as their father. The king granted her request, and on the 14th day, the Jewish people of Susa completed their defense, securing their safety within the capital entirely. Throughout the rest of the empire, on the 13th day, Jewish communities gathered together and struck down those who had risen against them. By the end of that day, the Jewish people throughout the provinces had gained relief from their enemies, and the threat of annihilation had finally ended. The scripture notes that the Jewish people did not take plunder from those they defeated, seeking only their survival rather than personal gain or vengeance. On the 14th day, throughout the provinces, the Jewish people rested and turned that day into one of feasting, gladness, and celebration together. In Susa, where fighting had extended one additional day, the people celebrated instead on the 15th day, feasting and rejoicing in their hard-won deliverance. Recognizing the significance of what had occurred, Mordecai began recording these events, ensuring the story would be remembered by generations not yet born. Mordecai wrote letters to Jewish communities throughout the empire, establishing an annual commemoration of the days when their sorrow had turned into joy. He named this new festival Purim, after the word pur, referring to the very lots Haman had cast to determine the date of their destruction. The festival was to include the sending of gifts to one another and generous donations to the poor, transforming personal deliverance into communal celebration. Queen Esther herself joined Mordecai in writing a second letter, confirming with full royal authority the establishment of Purim for all future generations. The Jewish people accepted this new observance upon themselves and their descendants, ensuring these days would never be forgotten throughout their generations. What began as a decree of destruction had transformed into a permanent celebration of survival, courage, and the unexpected power of one woman's brave decision. In the years that followed, Mordecai rose to become second in rank only to King Xerxes himself, a position of extraordinary influence throughout the empire. The scripture records that Mordecai was great among the Jewish people and accepted by the multitude of his people, seeking their welfare above all else. He spoke words of peace to his descendants, using his newfound authority not for personal gain, but for the continued protection of his people. Throughout the empire, the provinces prospered under this renewed peace, and Jewish communities that had once feared annihilation now lived in relative security. Queen Esther continued to serve as a steady and beloved presence within the palace, remembered not for vanity, but for the courage of her intervention. King Xerxes continued to rule over his vast empire, his power and greatness recorded in the chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia. The full account of these events was carefully written down, ensuring that Esther's courage and Mordecai's wisdom would never be forgotten by their people. Generations later, Jewish communities continued to gather each year to read this very story aloud, commemorating the festival of Purim with joy and remembrance. Children throughout the generations grew up hearing this story, learning that courage could rise from the most unexpected and seemingly powerless of places. Even today, thousands of years later, the festival of Purim continues to be celebrated, a living testament to a story that refused to be forgotten. Families continue to send gifts of food to one another and offer charity to those in need, honoring the very customs established so long ago. The tradition of costumes worn during Purim reflects the story's central theme, that hidden identities and unexpected reversals could ultimately determine the course of history. Historians and scholars have long studied this account, examining its place within the broader history of the Persian Empire and its Jewish communities. While some details remain debated among historians, the story's core themes of courage, identity, and providence have resonated across centuries and cultures. The empire that once stretched across 127 provinces has long since faded into history, its palaces reduced to ruins and memory. Yet the story born within those palace walls has outlasted the empire itself, carried forward through generations who found courage in Esther's example. Today, Esther's story continues to be read, studied, and retold across the world, inspiring countless individuals facing their own moments of impossible choice. Her story has transcended religious and cultural boundaries, becoming a universal symbol of quiet courage, rising unexpectedly from positions of apparent powerlessness. Mordecai's question to Esther, whether she had come to her position for exactly this moment, continues to challenge readers to consider their own purpose. Whether encountered through ancient scrolls, festival celebrations, or modern retellings, Esther's story continues to remind us that courage often arrives quietly, not with certainty. It was not through armies or weapons that her people were saved, but through the quiet, deliberate courage of one woman willing to risk everything. Her story endures not because of the empire she lived within, but because of the timeless truth she embodied, that one voice, spoken bravely, can change everything. This has been the complete story of Esther, the queen who risked everything, and in doing so, saved an entire nation from destruction. The story of Esther begins, as so many pivotal moments in history do, with something that looks at first like an ordinary court scandal, a king's wounded pride, a queen's quiet refusal, a vacancy that needed filling. Nothing about those opening events suggested that they would set in motion a chain of decisions leading toward the survival of an entire people. That is, perhaps, the first and most enduring lesson embedded within this account. History rarely announces its turning points in advance. The forces that reshape nations often begin quietly, in rooms far from where the consequences will eventually unfold. What makes Esther's story remarkable is not simply that a young woman rose from obscurity to a position of extraordinary influence. Many ancient stories contain that same basic architecture, the humble figure elevated by circumstance. What distinguishes this account is what she chose to do once she arrived there. Power in this story is never treated as an end in itself. It is treated as a responsibility, one that Esther could have just as easily avoided. She had every practical reason to remain silent. She was safe within the palace walls. Her identity was hidden. The decree, as devastating as it was, did not name her directly. Silence would have cost her nothing in the short term. And yet Mordecai's words to her, that deliverance would come from somewhere, but she and her family would not escape if she failed to act, carried a truth that extended far beyond her particular circumstances. It suggested that privilege, position, and safety are not simply gifts to be enjoyed, but responsibilities that come attached to consequence. The question he posed to her, wondering aloud whether she had come to her royal position for exactly this moment, has echoed across centuries precisely because it refuses to stay confined to its original context. It asks something of every person who encounters it. What has your particular position, whatever it may be, actually prepared you to do? Esther's response to that question is equally instructive. She did not rush forward recklessly. She did not act out of impulsive bravery alone. She fasted. She prepared. She built trust patiently across 2 separate banquets before ever revealing her true purpose. Her courage was paired with wisdom, and her boldness was tempered by strategy. This combination, bravery disciplined by patience, offers a different model of heroism than the sudden, singular acts of defiance often celebrated in other stories. Her courage unfolded over days through careful decisions, each one building toward the moment when she finally spoke the truth before the king. The reversal at the heart of this story, Haman's fall from the height of his power to the very gallows he built for another man, carries its own weight of meaning. It is a stark illustration of how quickly constructed power can collapse when it is built upon hatred rather than genuine merit. Haman's downfall did not come from some external army or rival faction. It came from the very trap he had designed for someone else, closing around him instead. There is a kind of moral symmetry in this outcome that ancient audiences would have recognized immediately, and that continues to resonate with readers today. Cruelty, however elevated its position, tends to carry within it the seeds of its own undoing. Mordecai's arc offers yet another dimension to this story's meaning. His initial refusal to bow was not born of stubbornness for its own sake, but of conviction rooted in identity and faith. He maintained that conviction even when it endangered not only himself, but everyone connected to him. And when the moment came for reward, he did not seek personal glory. His forgotten act of loyalty toward the king, buried for a time within the royal records, resurfaced at precisely the moment it was needed most. A reminder that quiet faithfulness, even when unacknowledged, is rarely wasted entirely. Perhaps what gives this story its lasting power, beyond its historical or religious significance, is its portrait of an entire community's transformation. From mourning to celebration, from vulnerability to agency, from silence to voice. The festival of Purim that emerged from these events was not simply a commemoration of survival. It was a deliberate choice to remember, to retell, and to ensure that future generations would understand both the danger their ancestors faced and the courage that met it. In choosing joy, generosity, and shared celebration as the response to near destruction, the tradition established something profound about how communities process collective trauma, not by forgetting it, but by transforming its memory into something that strengthens rather than diminishes them. The Persian Empire that forms the backdrop of this story has long since crumbled into ruins, its palaces reduced to archaeological fragments studied by historians and scholars. But the story that unfolded within its walls has proven far more durable than the empire itself. It continues to be read, retold, and reflected upon by people who have never seen Susa, who know nothing of ancient Persian court customs, yet who recognize something deeply familiar in Esther's fear, her hesitation, and her eventual choice to act despite the risk. In the end, this is a story about the space between comfort and conscience, between the safety of silence and the danger of speaking truth to power. It suggests that ordinary people, placed in extraordinary circumstances, carry within them the capacity to alter the course of history, not through certainty or fearlessness, but through the willingness to act even while afraid. Esther did not know how her story would end when she approached the king's inner court. She knew only that remaining silent was no longer a choice she could live with. That perhaps remains the truest legacy of her story, not the empire she helped save, but the enduring reminder that courage rarely feels certain in the moment it is required most.